Good morning, everyone. I'm Pastor Susan, and it is a privilege to serve this church. As the lead pastor, I'm eager to share the word with you today. And I want to begin by asking you a question, which is, have you ever been wowed by hospitality? I want you to think about that for a second. Have you ever been in a situation and you're like, wow, I need to up my hospitality game at my house? Have you ever been around someone who's just talented at welcoming people and being hospitable? Well, last week, I went over to the home of Ron and Amanda Giles, as I often do. And 4 of us women were gathering to share and pray, and we were going to have dinner together. And Amanda mentioned that she had some leftovers. I'm telling a story about you, Amanda. She's like, oh, what? So I was at Amanda's house, and they had some leftovers from some other event. So I thought the event would be pretty low key. But when we arrived, Amanda had set this beautiful table. There were flowers from her garden, silver utensils, like from real silver, like not silver colored. Her grandmother's china. There were cloth napkins and these gorgeous water glasses. This is not actually from her table, but hers was like better. Okay, I just forgot to take a picture. And then Amanda tells me, oh yeah, these water glasses I got from Goodwill. And I just thought, oh, that's the best. So impressive. We were wowed. Just by setting her table, Amanda was communicating something. And the message of her table was, you are special. Amanda was communicating something. She said non-verbally, but through what she was doing, she expressed, we're going to slow down and we're going to enjoy this lovely meal together because you matter. And we're just like a bunch of moms who were squeezing in some time together, but she's like, hold on, you guys matter. And so I'm going to bring out my grandmother's china. And I want to tell you that every meal tells a story. Every meal tells a story. And sometimes the story is you are worth setting a table for. Sometimes the story is even simpler. One of the ways that my husband tells me that he loves me is that if he goes out to lunch with someone, he'll eat half the meal. At the beginning of the meal, he'll ask for a takeout container, and he'll put half or a third of the meal in that takeout container. Then he'll text me, and then he'll arrange to drop the meal off, the leftovers off here, usually when I'm having a staff meeting or here at the office. And when I see that little container, what do I feel? I feel so much love. Yeah, because every meal tells a story or a message, and that message, the message of this takeout container for me is, I am thinking of you, and I want to share this chicken sandwich with you, or whatever it is. Because food is language. Food is language. It is communication, and especially meals are language. Meals can communicate love and belonging, celebration, comfort, thoughtfulness, remembrance. And if you start paying attention in Scripture, you'll discover that meals are also very important to God. Very important to God. And that is why it is striking that God prepares to rescue his people from slavery in the book of Exodus. He doesn't start with an army. He starts with a meal. This whole summer, throughout the sermons, we are pondering how and why God works through meals. So some background for you for today's passage. In the book of Exodus, chapters 1 through 11, we're told a story about the people of Israel who have been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. I want you to think about how many years we are celebrating in this country. Do you remember? 250 years. And these people have been toiling in Egypt for 400 years. And we experience this story through a man named Moses, who was born into a family that was living in the midst of this oppression, this unbearably difficult time of suffering. But God hears the people's prayers and finally raises up Moses to speak to the Pharaoh on behalf of God. And Moses becomes a mouthpiece for God, who takes the Egyptians through this crazy process of 9 different, very meaningful, symbolic plagues that God brings to the land. And they have this back and forth. It drastically affects the Egyptians, but it generally doesn't affect the Israelites. And each time Moses tells the Pharaoh that he needs to let the people of Israel go. And each time Pharaoh says yes, and then Pharaoh says no. He changes his mind. 9 times the Pharaoh goes back and forth, declaring that he would let them go, and then changes his mind. So this is the 10th plague. And God tells Moses that this would be the final plague and that Pharaoh would let them go. Can you imagine going back and forth 9 times? That's a lot. 9 times they've done this back and forth. So they're on the precipice. They're on the cusp. This is a moment of great strategic and historic importance. There's going to be a tidal shift change. And imagine how Moses felt when they're about ready to face something really big. How would he have prepared for this final power encounter? How would you have prepared? How would you have felt? You know, you learn a lot about leaders by how they prepare for very intense power encounter, pivotal moment situations. There's a woman named Tsai Ing-wen, who is Taiwan's former president. And I was reading an article about her. She is known for conducting exhaustive rehearsals before major press conferences, geopolitical crises, and encounters. Staff members will role play. They'll pretend to be really hostile journalists and foreign leaders, forcing her to practice staying calm and being an even-keeled presence, even under pressure. And they will do these rehearsals late into the night. So she prepares thoroughly, discipline, drills, intense teamwork is how Tsai Ing-wen prepares for critical moments. So this is Moses' moment. It is a geopolitical standoff. It is a spiritual power encounter, and there's going to be breakthrough after a long negotiation. How does Moses prepare for this important time? How does God tell Moses to prepare? He says, I want you to prepare a meal. I want you to prepare a meal. More specifically, God says, tell the people to prepare this very specific meal and do it in this very specific way. So let's go to Exodus 12, because here God gives very specific instructions on how to prepare this meal. This is Exodus 12, 1 through 14. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole congregation of Israel that on the 10th of this month, they are to take a lamb for each family, a lamb for each household. And if the household is too small for a whole lamb, it shall join its closest neighbor in obtaining one. The lamb shall be divided in proportion to the number of people who eat it. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a year-old male. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of the month. Then the whole assembled congregation of Israel shall slaughter it at twilight. They shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts on the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the lamb that same night. They shall eat it roasted over the fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat of it, any of it raw or boiled in water, but roast it over the fire with its head, legs, and inner organs. You shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning, you shall burn with fire. So they're on the precipice of a major power encounter, and he gives them a recipe. He gives them a guide for a meal with specific and very weird instructions. Many of us have heard this story before, but can you imagine being there? And God says, I want you to do this, cook it in this way, put the blood on your door. It's weird, isn't it? Think about it. Now, if you pay attention to the details, you realize that this is not just dinner. It is not just a recipe. It is a sacrifice turned into a meal. And they would know what these details mean. A lamb without blemish. It is roasted over the fire. Nothing left over. These are all things that would signal to them, this is a sacrificial offering we're talking about. This isn't just like, hey, it tastes better if it's roasted. No, these are the details that signal sacrificial offering. If I say to you, the Lord has instructed us to eat a sandwich, a burger that shall be wrapped in white paper with little red palm trees on it. And we shall get it by driving in a vehicle around a building on which it is prepared, but we shall not go into the building. What are you coming to understand? We're going to eat In-N-Out. The Lord wants us, friends, to eat In-N-Out burger. We understand the cultural connection of that, right? They would understand that this is the language of sacrifice. The people would immediately recognize that God is connecting this meal to a larger story of his saving work. Perhaps they would also remember another famous sacrifice from their history when Isaac and Abraham climbed the mountain together. Some of you may remember. And Isaac, the son of Abraham, says, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb. That's a story filled with meaning. Now, generations later, God is once again providing the lamb. And the people didn't know it yet, but this story is pointing beyond Egypt and even pointing forward toward Jesus, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. The story of Exodus 12 doesn't just invite people to remember the long story of God, but it tells people to participate in this story. That's the even weirder thing. Verse 11 says, this is how you shall eat it. Your loins girded, sandals on your feet. He's giving them a dress, a way to dress for this, a dress code for this dinner. He said, your staff shall be in your hand, and you shall eat it hurriedly. It is the Passover of the Lord. I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from human to animal, and all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you live, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Did you know that in this story, he tells them how to dress and how to eat? He tells them, eat it with urgency. So they're supposed to dress in their traveling clothes, and they're supposed to be like, eat it in a way they're like, we're on the way. Why does he tell them to eat it that way? Well, he is telling them to dress like they really believe what God says is going to happen is going to happen. And remember, they've gone back and forth 9 times. But God is saying, pay more attention to what I am telling you than to your sense of discouragement or of mistrust or confusion or of being unsure from the past. I'm asking you to trust what I say. That this time I'm saying you are going to go. I don't know about you, but if I'm the people of Israel, I might be tempted to be like, yeah, maybe. Could I still wear it in my jammies? Could I, kind of commit in my clothing? Can I wear shoes, but, can I just wear the clothes I kind of feel like? Because, hedge my bets. Might not happen. Can I just hold back? Can I just wait and see? Can I just not completely put myself out there? But God is saying, if I tell you it's going to happen, and I want you to dress like it's going to happen. How about the blood on the doorposts? Anyone wonder about that? Because to us as modern readers, it sounds so odd, right? Now, there are millions of reasons for this. There's so many angles to the meaning of this. But one thing I want to point out to you is that here, it is a way for them to say, I believe what you promise, and I will take part in it. Do you see how the people of Israel had to commit to doing this? They had to commit to putting blood on their front door. They had to say, yes, I will be a part of it. I will hold this in my heart. God is asking his followers to not just participate, but to commit. You either do it or you don't. It's not a matter of saying, hey, could I paint my doorstep with like a different color? Hey, maybe mauve. Could I do it kind of, but in my own way? Could I do it next week? Could I put a little bit of blood maybe on the doorknob? Could I do it the way I think? But the Lord is like, no, I've given you these instructions. Either do it or don't. You are invited to commit or not. This is how we're doing it, and this is how we're doing it now. God also says, this day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. Throughout your generations, you shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance. Now, historians believe that the first Passover meal took place approximately 3,000 or 3,500 years ago. And I believe that this meal has been recreated every year since. Isn't that mind-blowing? It might be the most recreated meal longevity-wise in human history. It's been recreated because the Lord has said, do this meal again and again and again, because I want you to remember and participate and commit. This meal is a meal with a message. It is the story of God and his people. God wanted them to remember, not just with facts, and not just to remember information. Was it a lamb or goat? That's not the point. The point is he wanted them to remember who they were, who he was, and what God does. What does God do? And to remember that on that night, every family had a choice. They could hear God's promises and obey it, or ignore it. They could trust him enough to act on it or not. Sometimes in the commands of God, you don't have all the time in the world. Though the Lord is a patient God, sometimes the door of opportunity is for a specific time, right? Where God says, no, tonight, you either do what I say or you don't. They had to put blood on the doorpost. They had to prepare a meal, the meal of obedience. They had to eat dressed for travel, and they had to eat with urgency. In other words, they had to live as though God's promises was actually true before they saw it fulfilled. And that is what faith looks like. Living as if the promises of God are actually true, even before you know exactly what's going on. The people of Israel, they had no idea. Isn't there wilderness out there? How's that going to work? They didn't know where they would sleep a month later. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they knew what God had said. So they picked up their sandals and they picked up their staffs and they ate the meal and they got ready to move. Faith often looks like that. It means sometimes it looks like not having all the answers or not seeing the whole picture. It means simply taking the next step because God has spoken. Just taking the next step because God has spoken. Faith is not merely agreeing that God exists. It is arranging your life around the conviction that God will do what he says he will do. I want to ask you a few questions. Are there ways that you need to choose to commit? Not do it your way, not do it partially, but when God clearly speaks, is there a way that you need to say, yes, I will. I will join. I will commit. I will eat the meal in the way that you asked me to. I will put blood on the doorposts. Where is God asking you to put your sandals on? Might there be an act of obedience that you have been delaying? Are there ways that instead of committing to what the Lord is asking his people, you're standing back around the edges saying, I'm not sure. I'll wait and see. What conversation have you been avoiding that the Lord has been prompting you to have? Is there an invitation from God that you have been postponing? Where is God asking you to put your sandals on and commit and to join and to obey and to go for it? You know, this morning, as we prayed before the service, I told the folks in the prayer group, you guys, I have a sermon, but I'm not sure what the message from the Lord is. And so we prayed. And in the next 45 minutes, I felt like the Lord gave me a word. And that word is commit. Sometimes, I think often, but there are certain times when the Lord says, are you in or are you out? Are you ready? Do what I'm asking you to do. I will explain the rest to you as we go. But can you commit? Can you do the instructions I've given you to do? That is what the Passover meal communicates. That is the message that it carries. That the people of God were called to do what God told them to do and to remember that call and God's faithfulness in the midst of it. And God did deliver the people of Israel. The lesson of the Passover meal is that we need to continue to trust God enough to take the next step even before we see where the road leads. Would you join me in a time of silent listening, God? Oh God, I ask that you'd speak to each one of us practically, specifically, and Lord, give us a sense of how you are asking us to commit to your faithful deliverance.